This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of the DocNJock Wrestling Podcast. We've got a absolutely crazy show. Basically 2 weeks into the new year, and we already have had 3 stories of the year. And like I said, we are roughly 14, 15 days into the new year. Absolutely bonkers with what is going on in the world of wrestling. On today's show, we've got a ton. And when I say a ton, I mean a metric ton of fallout from Vince and his hostile takeover of WWE, him reinserting himself back in the company, and that comes with all kinds of layers that we're going to delve into. Of course, we're going to take a look at some AEW news, a lot of WWE news. We might even sprinkle in some New Japan news. Doing it with me, as always, he's the one, he's the only. He is the Doc, John Macaroon. Because this was a weird week. This was absolutely strange, and really it all kind of kicked off late Tuesday night when a lot of news started to circulate and things started to break. First off, we had Stephanie McMahon announce her retirement, basically. She said she's going to go back on hiatus, but then she's like, I'm going to make it permanent and I'm going to retire. We kind of thought this was curious because we figured it was related to Vince, and sure enough, the second thing that we had happen was Vince McMahon is announced the executive chairman of the board of WWE. The third thing that ends up popping off, and this ends up taking place, I believe it was late Wednesday, actually it might have been late Tuesday night. My days kind of are running together here. There was a deal that was said to have taken place where WWE was sold to the Saudi Arabia's investment fund. This was confirmed, and then it was backtracked, and it's not confirmed. So at this time, it was not sold, but it sounds like there may be a deal in principle that has been set up. The fourth thing that we have is now Vince is getting sued by shareholders because of the way he took back his company. And then on January 13th, we get a report from CNBC that AEW wants to merge with WWE and wants to work Vince back into the fold. It's been a bonkers week of wrestling. What was your reaction to all of this? I mean, like, there are 5 stories right there that are absolutely monsters that should take up one show that we have. But in 1 week, on different days, we've had 5 monstrous things that took place. What was your reaction to how this week in wrestling has unfolded, specifically with WWE, and then you see on the back end AEW getting looped in?
Well, for those of you that know me, I was definitely excited by one of the reports. I thought that potentially we were going to be elevated like to the main stage and become the official podcast of WWE. If you imagine if the Saudis can be in charge of WWE, what that could mean for me, what that could mean for you. I could be the general manager. I could be a writer. I could be all-knowing influencer. I could be the Muhammad Hassan of WWE 2.0. So I was excited by that news. And then, you got to kind of backtrack a little bit with all the human rights, and all the wrestlers would want to leave and don't want to be part of the company anymore. So you're like, damn it. Just like always, all the Middle Easterns get no appreciation, no love, all hate from WWE. And obviously one wrestler would have a major problem if the Saudis bought WWE. But it's crazy because, to be honest, the news surrounding everything away from the television has been much more entertaining than the news on television, that it's actually crazy because of the fact that, to start, Stephanie McMahon had a meeting just 7 days ago and shared, look, nothing's really going to change. Management is going to be the same. Nothing's really going to be changed. And all of a sudden, boom, Vince is back. And all of a sudden, she's out. So that sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling community. What does that mean? And then the news, what disappointed me most was that accuracy was just thrown out the window. People were just flying off the handle saying it was sold. Of course, on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, we made jokes. We talked about who could potentially be the general manager. You got me in a burqa. You got me doing the hijab thing, doing everything to make jokes about it. No official reports from us, but it was embarrassing because did WWE leak that news to kind of get a gauge of what the reaction would be? Is it a stock ploy? Is it something that WWE is being nefarious about? So much misinformation that just emanated through the internet kind of shows you what the power of the internet is. But I don't think people take it all that seriously because it's wrestling and nobody really considers wrestling journalists at the highest level of journalism. But I just thought that this week was more about gossip, rumors, innuendo than facts, which is fine, but we can start with this. It's clear WWE is going to be sold. Vince is back to sell the company. I'm curious. I don't think, cuz, let's be real, Vince McMahon is not going to sell to Tony Khan. Unless he gets top dollar, I don't see Vince selling to the competition. I don't see Vince working for Tony Khan. I think that would be, on some level, a admittance of, hey, we lost, and some kind of ego ploy for the Khans. I don't see that happening. I think Vince wants, best case scenario, he wants a job. He wants to be an executive consultant and have a streaming company, Comcast, Netflix, Amazon, some company that will guarantee another 5-10 years on television, and he can go off into the sunset with a massive $6 billion check. It's not going to be cheap, but my biggest takeaway is, and my biggest question, outside of all the rumors and news, is WWE in its current state with what it can do, is it worth $6 billion? I feel like no. I feel like this is now one of those kind of deals where the company that ends up buying it is not going to run it the same way Vince is not going to run it and take the company to the same level that a guy that lived his whole life did. So I'm just concerned that a sale could potentially be the end of one of the biggest companies in the world, because this is exactly the same thing that happened with WCW. And they were sold from Ted Turner, who loved the brand, loved the product, loved the competition, to some conglomerate who wanted to cut cost. And they basically put Eric Bischoff's hands, they tied his hands behind his back. And what happened? Vince McMahon took advantage and destroyed the company and bought it at a very low, cheap rate. So this is what my concern is that if it's sold, if it's not sold to the right person, the storylines, the love that we have for the sport could be looked at and could be something completely different. It was such a crazy-ass week, cuz. Crazy.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. And I think you're right. At some point, WWE is going to be sold. The original succession plan that was laid out for WWE that we all speculated was going to happen, where Stephanie and Triple H would end up getting it and running the company. Honestly, it seemed like it was working. We had an 8-month stretch where we've gotten some of the best WWE storylines we have had in a very long time, some of the most entertaining wrestling we've had in a long time. And now Vince has forced his way back. And it really seems like when Vince stepped down, Vince never really stepped away. Vince was working on something else. Vince had something else kind of working on the side. And it might have been a deal with Saudi Arabia. And I'll be honest with you, if WWE does get sold to the Saudi investment fund, I'm not watching WWE anymore. If we continue the wrestling podcast after that, and WWE is a part of it, you will be running WWE's section of it. I will refuse to watch it. I will have no input on it because I'm not going to watch that. I can't support that. I'll be honest with you. I was really upset with the World Cup going to Qatar, and I had a hard time watching the World Cup in Qatar because of all the stuff that was looped into that. It is more there than just, it's this massive company that's got a ton of money and it all comes from this one country. There is a lot that is packed into it. And you really have to do your research and you've got to make a decision for yourself. I know you like to laugh and you like to make jokes about it because brown people get to do things. I understand that. It's all fun and games. But when you really break it down, like I said, you've got to make a decision for yourself whether you're going to support that. I, at this moment in time, refuse to support that. So if that's the case, I will be stepping away from WWE. Now, it really does seem as though Stephanie was kind of forced out, or she did not want to be the opposition to her father, and that was why she retired. And that was my initial thought. Also, my initial thought with the news breaking on Tuesday night was that, holy crap, this family is really broken. This family is really, really messed up, and honestly, it all seems to stem from Vince. Vince getting announced as the executive chairman, it just kind of feels like that was the next thing that was going to take place. Vince getting sued by his shareholders was something that kind of shocked me. I was like, man, I wonder if somebody was going to do that. And sure as shit, somebody did. But I do think you're right. I don't think Vince wants to work with AEW. I think AEW would love to work with Vince. And I think merging them might be the best case scenario for the longevity of wrestling is if they were to go together, because obviously Tony Khan has a care for wrestling. Bringing Vince in and kind of allowing him to work with WWE would help preserve some of WWE. I don't know if the storylines would be all that good. I don't know if what we would actually be getting would be all that great, but I think it would help preserve what we have, because I do feel like what you said, where WCW was owned by Ted Turner. Ted Turner had a soft spot for wrestling because it helped save TNT, TBS. It helped save Turner Broadcasting. And so he always had a soft spot for it. Well, when he turned around and he sold it to AOL was like, what the heck is this carny shit? And they basically, like you said, tied Eric Bischoff's hands behind his back. Next thing you know, the company was going down the toilet. Vince McMahon steps in, buys it for pennies on the dollar, and essentially destroyed WCW. Took the archive footage, and WCW was no more. And that seems to be where we are headed with WWE. It's what I can say is right now it is very shaky, it's very uncertain, and it feels almost like this is the swan song. Like it is a very sad day for WWE. Something that you and I have watched for the majority of our 40 plus years of life, like something that you and I have enjoyed regularly on Monday nights, on Sunday nights, on Saturdays, that I got so excited when they went to Saturday pay-per-views. I remember going over to my grandma, trying to figure out how to get over to my grandmother's house so I could watch Monday Night Raw, because we didn't have cable when I was a kid. My grandma did, but we did not. So I'd always try to figure out some way that I could orchestrate something to get us over to my grandma's house, and I could get on the couch and I could at least watch that first hour of Monday Night Raw. And I remember sitting in my basement. We had a TV in my basement by our washer and dryer when we eventually did get cable. And I remember sitting in my basement on a chair just watching wrestling, because nobody else in the house wanted to watch wrestling with me if my sister didn't. So Monday Night Raw and WWE was part of a fabric of my life. And I feel like it's a very sad day that this company is going in this direction and doing what it's doing. I've been very excited since Triple H and Stephanie McMahon have kind of taken over and have done things. And it really feels like, it really feels like they have done things properly. They've done things properly by the staff. They've done things properly by the shareholders. They've done things properly to help preserve a company and give us a product that has been fantastic, only to have basically a senile, delusional, a control freak old man force his way back into a company that he owned and basically take it over to now give it to somebody else to take it private so he can continue to work. It's absolutely a sad day for me. Speaking of sad days, I guess we got to transition into wrestling, and there was some good stuff, there was some sad stuff, there was some bad stuff. It was kind of a weird mix. I thought Monday Night Raw overall was a pretty good show. I think from the WWE standpoint, the product that we got on Monday Night Raw was absolutely good. I think the product that we got on Friday night was poor, and I think some of that has to do with a lot of the things that were going on basically throughout the week, because all those stories kind of broke starting on Tuesday. So it makes sense that the best product we got from WWE this week was on Monday night, in my estimation. I think some of the bigger storylines coming out of Monday night, could they be paving a reunion for the Hurt Business? I want to know where you're kind of at with this faction's return. You had Bobby Lashley in the back. You had MVP come up and talk to him. Yeah, there was another point where you had MVP talking to Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander about basically restarting their career and basically getting it back on track. Talks about how he wants to expand with some new members. Last time we seen MVP, he was working with Omos. I feel if the Hurt Business does get back together, Omos will somehow be involved in that. I don't necessarily know if that's good or bad, but I do remember really enjoying the Hurt Business. I thought the Hurt Business was a really good faction at one point, and Vince McMahon broke it up because Vince McMahon wanted to break it up. Where are you at for a possible return of the Hurt Business as a faction?
Yeah, it was great to see Bobby Lashley. I thought it was great. the way in which MVP trying to weasel his way back into his life, it did have a feel of a faction that did not do as much as it could. It was a great faction, and they kept breaking it up, bringing it back, breaking it up. It's interesting now, and just circling back a little bit, what will creative look like with new owners, or what's it going to look like? Who's going to get pushed and things like that? Who's going to be the booker? Is Triple H going to be involved? So many questions, but with the Hurt Business, it's great. I think that it's just tough because you have characters like Shelton Benjamin, who got a massive ovation on Main Event for his 20-year anniversary, and just kind of seems like it was swept under the rug. Not even on main television, not even real acknowledgement and appreciation of a character and performer that was involved in some really key storylines back in the day. Now he's just enhancement talent and one of those dudes that you wish could have been treated a little bit better. But I look at it and I say that, look, there's a lot of factions in wrestling right now, so I'm more leaning toward individual success. It just feels like every segment there's 6 people on my screen. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, I got to look at the tag team with AJ Styles and a woman and this and that. And then you got the Judgment Day and you got this faction and that faction. And then NXT is Faction Central. It's like, whatever happened to, Bret Hart walking down to the ring, and then he took on Shawn Michaels, and then he had to have his whole Canadian family, and then Shawn Michaels had to have an entourage. And it's just, I'm just kind of in the mood for a little period of time when we can scale it back. Bobby Lashley deserves his own push. Let him do his thing and move him beyond the U.S. title. I just think it's a step backwards. I mean, I know it's long-term booking and you can get back at Theory for all the actions and done and get back with Rollins and all that, but I just feel like Bobby Lashley's main event talent is not utilized the best. It'll be interesting. I think in this iteration of Triple H's creative, it's been entertaining and rewarding, so I'm curious to see. It's just not my thing. I just think Bobby Lashley should be in the picture now, somehow or another, weaseling his way to get to Roman Reigns, fiddling with Kevin Owens, just peeking in there. I think that would be great. I think that Bobby Lashley had a great title run, but I think that he deserves to be in the main event picture right now.
I think with this renewal, if they do go this direction, I think what you're going to get, though, is you're going to get a very baby-faced Hurt Business, whereas before the Hurt Business was more heel. So I think what you're asking for, I totally get what you're saying, right? I think if we do get this new iteration of the Hurt Business, it will be much more Bobby Lashley forward, and it will be much more the vision of Bobby Lashley with MVP being the mouthpiece. Whereas before, it really felt like it was MVP's vision, even though it was very Bobby Lashley forward. It felt like it was very MVP's vision of what the Hurt Business was. So I think you might get a little bit of a different dichotomy with this new version of the Hurt Business. I'm interested in it. I think it could work, and I think you've got guys like Bobby Lashley, who I do agree with you. I think he is main event star, main event potential. He is that guy. I feel like Bobby Lashley should never be lower than upper mid card. But I also think you can help elevate guys like Shelton Benjamin, who is a great hand, guys like Cedric Alexander, who is fantastically athletic. I think you can help elevate those guys by putting them with a guy like MVP and putting them with Bobby Lashley, and you turn them face, and it could work. You could then bring Omos in, and I don't know necessarily what you do with Omos, because we've talked about his in-ring work. We don't think it's great. Guy can't really cut a promo. Guy looks physically imposing, so he could be the heater for the group and maybe grow into a role almost like Kevin Nash. I think Kevin Nash was maybe a little bit more athletic than Omos, but remember, Kevin Nash was Shawn Michaels' heater for a long time. And then Kevin Nash really grew into his own and became a pretty damn good wrestler. So maybe Omos goes that route. Maybe he's the heater for Bobby Lashley, but generally you don't need a heater if you're a babyface. So I'm not sure what the heck you do here, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. I think it could be interesting, and I'm willing to give it a shot because I think a lot of stuff that Triple H has done creatively has been very, very good lately, and something that is very, very good. Judgment Day are now the number one contenders to take on the Usos for the tag belts. I think this was the right choice. I think this was a good decision. I think the way they got to the end, where they worked Dom in to help get the victory, I thought that was interesting. You are trying to make a star out of Dominic Mysterio. I think it was the right choice for them to be the number one contenders. I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about Gangster Dom. I think he looks funny. I think he sounds silly. I think if it was anybody else who was delivering some of these lines, I think it might come off a little bit more believable and more credible. I don't think this audience was into his gimmick at all when he had to sit down with Miz on Miz TV. What was your reaction to the Judgment Day becoming number one contenders? What was your thoughts on Finn Balor suffering an injury, using finger quotes, to get Dominic Mysterio inserted into the match to help get the victory? And what do you make of Dom's new gangster gimmick where he spent less than 20 days at a local jail facility, or less than 20 minutes at a local jail facility, to then be busted out, and it's changed his life? Well, what's your reaction to all this? Judgment Day's got a lot going on with it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Rhea Ripley had a match too, so she's getting herself over. I loved it. I thought that, okay, now that you have a faction, you're telling this story, now you need to elevate them. Do I believe that they have a chance to potentially end the Usos? Yeah, I do. I think that, eventually speaking, the run of the Usos has to come to an end, and who's the faction that would get the most rub? I think the Judgment Day would be amazing. Dom, oh, come on, cuz it doesn't sell to me that Dom is hard coming out of prison. I think they could have went something different. Like I think that he should have came out maybe being a little traumatized, like something happened to him that is unspeakable. You know what I mean?
Dude, he looks like a bootleg Conan. You remember when Conan was in WCW? He looks like a bootleg Conan. Yeah. Like, Conan was great, but like Dom does not work.
No, I bitch slap the guy in my cell. Okay, Dom, it's funny, it's entertaining, and it's funny. You can laugh at it, but it's not believable that they can be at the same level as the Usos. I think that, while I would like to see the Judgment Day get over, I think the Usos will just continue and look for a bigger tag team to drop the titles to. The Judgment Day is great, but for me, I think you're limiting one of the biggest stars. I think Damian Priest being a mouthpiece, he should be wrestling every week.
Yeah.
The man is money. He's golden. He's got the leadership quality.
In this match, he held his own for 40-some minutes. Like, he wrestled his ass off in this match. But I agree with you. He is a star.
That's what I'm saying, is that when you see it, you're like, why isn't this guy in the title picture? Why isn't this guy kind of weaseling his way into messing with Theory and things like that? I walked away from that quality matchup going, man, Damian Priest needs to be highlighted a lot more. And I think he is. I think that currently, as the Judgment Day kind of is now, you see Finn Balor as kind of the headpiece and the guy. But maybe if Damian Priest breaks away, you're going to see some great things from a talented individual. Hopefully the character development stays strong and his involvement doesn't get put to the background. And that's what WWE does sometimes different characters just evolve into being leaders. Right now, you see Damian Priest kind of being the guy that you think should be the leader. Rhea Ripley's getting a lot of love, Finn Balor, and things like that. But I just feel like Dominic doesn't belong in this group, so they should just kick him out as fast as possible and keep it moving.
He does feel like he is the weak link in the group.
Yes.
But the thing is, it feels like the group has been put around him to help insulate him. You know this watching football, right? You can have a quarterback that is very middle of the pack, but you put enough good pieces around him, you can elevate him, a.k.a. Jared Goff. We both felt like going into this year, Jared Goff was a bottom third tier quarterback. By the end of the season, Jared Goff was a top 10 quarterback in the league. Why? He has enough pieces around him. He's insulated. I think they're trying to do something like that with Dom, where he is the weak link here. He is the oddball in this entire group. He does not necessarily fit, but they put him with a dude like Finn Balor, who's absolutely great. Finn Balor got the Bullet Club over. Finn Balor created the Bullet Club, got the Bullet Club popular. And we know all about the Bullet Club. Damian Priest is a guy who you just said is main event level. He is a star in the making. We both agree Rhea Ripley is fantastic at everything she does. Rhea Ripley is, in my estimation, she is one of the 5 best women in WWE. So you put these big stars, these big pieces with this guy, you hope it helps elevate his talent and help bring him up. There's a bit of a disconnect there. And I don't know what they're going to do with him. I don't know where this is necessarily going. I find Gangster Dom to be quite humorous. I find it to be very funny. But I don't know if it necessarily has legs. And it'll be interesting to see if it does have any legs.
Yeah, it's. I feel like the Judgment Day and the time that they get, Rhea Ripley too, man. You can't discount what she's able to do. I think that she's just absolutely
She's
amazing,
fantastic.
absolutely fantastic. And now looking to Sami Zayn working with the Bloodline and his matchup 669 versus Kevin Owens, I think that on SmackDown it permeated.
669.
I tweeted WWE. I said, "Man, I'm excited." Owens, Owens, Sami Zayn, 669 is going to be absolutely epic, and it was okay. Sami was distraught. As the Bloodline interfered in his match against Kevin Owens, and look, every time it gets announced, we laugh and we joke because we've literally, throughout the course of the run of the over 250 episodes we've done here on this wrestling podcast and the time we talked about wrestling on Doc and Jock, Sami Zayn's been feuding with Kevin Owens. It's like they fought so much, but this iteration, this version is good because you're now telling the story of where do the loyalties lie of Sami Zayn. What impact does the friendship have with Kevin Owens and how that's going to be viewed by Roman Reigns? Now, Roman's last week was interesting in regards to questioning Sami a little bit, and you're starting to plant some seeds of doubt. Like, hey, Sami, are you trying to be the leader here? What's going on? And you see that back and forth. But bottom line, what's going to happen when the Bloodline goes and attacks Kevin Owens? That's his friend. That's the kind of seeds you're planting. And I think that's not going to go good that Sami Zayn was distraught because the Usos and Roman Reigns, they're the big dogs, and they're going to destroy everybody in their wake. So this could be the beginning of the planting of the seeds of Sami Zayn. Good match. I thought Sami getting over was cool. Obviously, with the theme of the Bloodline interfering all the time was great. I thought that you were right, that SmackDown was kind of stale in their approach this week. It was kind of like, well, we got to kind of get some other characters over and do some things. But in the end, I thought SmackDown highlighted by Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, and the Bloodline was good. I also liked the Intercontinental match more than I thought I would. I am really liking Gunther. I think that his star is rising every single week. But outside of those two things, SmackDown was really, I was shocked at how stale kind of SmackDown was this week.
It kind of felt like it was mailed in. It really did. It was not SmackDown's best show. And usually SmackDown, we get fantastic shows from there. This week, quite different. Look, I find the match with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens to be incredibly interesting because he looks so distraught. He looks so taken aback, so confused by what was going on. And I'm not sure if it's because the Bloodline was attacking Kevin Owens and he feels bad because they're beating up his friend, or if he feels as though the tribal chief and the Bloodline don't trust him to get the job done, and he's upset because, hey, I was doing this. I was going to win this match. You have to believe in me. And maybe he feels as though they don't believe in him. So I feel like, again, really interesting storytelling for this long-running story that we have, because it's a little bit twofold. Like, what is actually going on here? Is Sami upset because the Bloodline beat the crap out of one of his best friends? Or is Sami upset because the Bloodline doesn't necessarily trust him to get the job done? Because you're not going to necessarily interfere with the Usos match. You're not going to necessarily interfere with Solo Sikoa's matches, but you're going to interfere with my match. Why are we doing this? Do you not believe in me? Do you not trust me? Which brings me to another thing. Solo Sikoa is absolutely fantastic. He is unadulterated rage, and I love it. He is an absolute menace, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. I enjoy watching him because his character never wavers. Like, he doesn't say anything, which is fine. He always looks gruff and upset, which is great. And the guy is just a wrecking ball, goes out there and destroys stuff. You want to talk about a heater, a heavy hitter. Solo Sikoa is fantastic. I think it's great. And I do love his relationship with Sami Zayn. So I thought the end of SmackDown was really, really good. And you're right. This is like the 9,000th time that we've had this match between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. This was a really good way to cap off what I deem to be a bit of a poor SmackDown and a very average week for WWE. And again, WWE has a whole lot of stuff going on with it, so it only makes sense that it would be an average week for WWE. Let's transition into AEW. Now, you feel AEW needs to be in an all hands on deck mode. You feel that AEW needs to have everybody at the very top of the card doing very top of the card things at all times for at least, I believe you said it was at least the next 2 to 3 weeks. Why do you feel this way?
Like you said, WWE is distracted. No matter what anybody's going to tell you, WWE is now in like cover up mode, trying to keep the talent happy. You got this unrest. You got people wondering, shit, did I have to update my wrestling resume? Should I start putting out feelers to other companies? Even though, when you show up to an arena and Triple H has to address the wrestlers, what does that mean? That means the concern level is high. And even though Triple H says, yeah, there's no interest in Vince handing over creative, you're hearing rumors potentially that Vince is sending out text messages saying that things aren't being done right. So you look at things and you realize this is the time, and you see the difference. When you compete with another company, you got to also pay attention to the things that are happening. And AEW, when you see the stars on AEW, it's great. When you see Chris Jericho, when you see Adam Cole, the crowd is different. When you see Saraya and you see Dr. Britt Baker and you see some of the mid-card, they're not true mid-card. It's kind of like you have the top stars that are really at the top elite level of AEW, and you want to see him. You're invested. When Adam Cole came out, it was cool. It was like, okay, who's Adam Cole going to fight? It's great. And you have some of the mid-cards, and you're like, this is why you need to have 2 hours of Rampage, and Dynamite needs to be, back when the day, you remember when Raw was like 2 hours or an hour? You just had every week, it was Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Razor Ramon, the top of the card, and you saw the big-time wrestlers. You saw squash matches, but the mid-card was more relegated to superstars or other type shows. So for me, AEW needs to highlight the stars more and go full bore. Take the 2 hours, and definitely you open up this week with Hangman Page and Jon Moxley. It was awesome. Then you have Bryan Danielson in a nice match with Takeshita, to say his name correctly, and you're like, yes, this is what I want to see. You have MJF interrupting, you have good matches, and you have Ricky Starks, and now the potential that you're going to share here in a few moments of some stars that may be available that you can bring in. My opinion is Dynamite needs to be the showcase of basically the 1A stars, and you got to find other avenues to get the mid-card over right now for the foreseeable future because the ratings are stagnant. You're having big shows that are not even drawing a 1.1. You're not growing.
I mean, so stagnant that you've got CM Punk calling out MJF about ratings.
Yeah,
and ratings
it's about ratings. And look, AEW is making money from all the accounts. When Tony Khan walks out, the company grossed potentially $100 million or made $100 million, and obviously expenses and things like that. But if he's just clearing a little bit of a profit of $2 million, he's happy. So you look at it and you say, AEW right now has the chance to take I want this to be more competitive. And you look, you still see mistakes. You still see, how on earth when Chris Jericho, the guy that's been the head of your company, has a microphone and he passes it to Daniel Garcia and he's got to give him another microphone because Daniel's confused because the words are not coming out of his effing mouth. Nobody hears it. It's not right. You got to be crisper. You got to treat this like this is the NFL and you're at the 1 yard line and it's 4th and inches and you score, you win the championship. And every single time it's at that spot, AEW drops the football. And you're like, no, you got to step it up. You got to be crisp. You got to have, I don't want to see at the end of 2023 a 10-part botch series with all the mistakes that these wrestlers made. And unfortunately, Takeshita almost made a bad one, potentially almost dropping Bryan Danielson, but all with the great character that he is, he turned it into a special German suplex. But it's got to be crisper. The moves got to be better. They got to tell better stories. They just got to basically. They're doing A- work, which is great. It'll make money. It'll draw. It'll be over. But I'm looking at it from the perspective of a coach that says, "Okay, great. We're in the championship and we won one, but I think we can win 5. I think we can win 6. That we can be a dynasty. Do we want to be good? Do we want to be WCW at the height of Nitro? Or do we want to be WCW Saturday Night where it's there for 20 years, but you checked in with it one time and there's Lex Luger. It's cool. Oh, it's nice. But then they took it to the next level and got to the point where you had the NWO and it was like, whoa, this is the biggest thing in the world. And that's where AEW is. They're on the cusp. They have talent. They have the excitement. It's there at the forefront. You're right at the cusp. Don't fucking fumble the ball. And I just feel like they are by putting situations that are not ideal with these characters and the performances and the production issues and shit like that. You got to step this up one more notch. You got to take it to the next level. And I'm not sure they're ready to do that yet. Because, dude, Tony Khan did an interview with Rich Eisen. The dude has 5 jobs. Fulham director, Jacksonville. He's got a tech company that provides stats. He's doing creative for AEW. That is a lot of hats to wear, and I can see where he could be distracted.
You know, this is the one thing I will say about. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff in what you're saying there, and it's basically you're just demanding better, right? And I think something that highlights some of the things that WW or AEW does, where they just like try to get by, right? Like we've got a match against Ricky Starks and Jake Hager coming up this week. Jake Hager's promo was like a wet blanket. It was bad. It wasn't good. I'm going to slap your face off your face. And you could even see Ricky Starks being like, what? Like he was trying to do the math on how that would work. And what AEW ends up turning around and doing is on Rampage, they end up packaging that as part of the build for that. That's not going to get you interested. Like, doesn't get me interested. It's like it could be better. It could. There are things that that's the one thing I think you're trying to say is it could be better. You could be doing more.
Yes.
You could be doing a lot better job. And that's kind of not what we're getting. And I think this trickles down to kind of what we get, right? It really feels like at times AEW Dynamite is WCW Nitro when it was pumping on all cylinders, when it was kicking WWE's ass. That's what Dynamite feels like most weeks. And then Rampage feels like, I don't know if you ever used to watch it when you were a kid. On TBS in the middle of Saturday afternoon, they would do an hour wrestling from it was like the WCW power plant or whatever it was. And you would get like B and C level wrestlers wrestling. And it was basically those guys working on stuff, but they were telling stories. They had things going on, but they were working on things. They were trying to get to that next level. It wasn't what Nitro was. Nitro was like supercharged, and it was like, we're here, we're kicking ass, everything's awesome. This stuff was like a walk in the park, and it wasn't very good. And that's what it really feels like. A lot of energy and effort is put into Dynamite, and then you get this monster letdown with Rampage, and that's supposed to be your B show, but it really feels like it's a D show, not even a C show. And it's like, you need to be doing more. You've got 3 hours of TV. You need to be maximizing it at all times and taking advantage of the time you have, because you did walk over a sleeping giant in WWE. And then Triple H got installed in creative. And things kind of started to turn. And yeah, Vince is coming back now. And it's going to be interesting to see what the next couple of months are going to kind of leave for us. But you really need to ratchet things up. You really need to be able to dial it up and give really interesting, good storylines with all 3 hours of television that you have. With all the stuff that you have, you really need to be giving more. In a place where, like, I really feel like you could have gave some more, right? You had a match where it was I think inadvertently implied that there was going to be a bigger star for this match. And what you ended up getting was you got Tony Storm as Saraya's tag team partner. Now, at no point did AEW say that Mercedes Moné, a.k.a. Sasha Banks, was going to be the partner. But it was kind of inferred that way. It was kind of left very open-ended. And then AEW tried to get themselves out of it after giving that tease last week when they were like, oh, Tony Storm's going to be my partner, and Sheeta looked upset. And it was kind of like, all right, well, this feels like a dirty diaper that we're going to get. This crowd was so upset that Tony Storm was Saraya's partner that they didn't do a last-second change. Was it fair for the crowd to be that upset? And should AEW have done something different, especially coming off of the heels of the news that you had on Tuesday night where Stephanie steps down, Vince gets elected the executive board member, and you're basically waking up Wednesday morning to stuff that Saudi Arabia may have purchased WWE. Should AEW, should Tony Khan have made a hard pivot and did something different and made it feel a little bit more special? Because this really did feel like the dirty diaper that we got the week prior.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, again, a missed opportunity. But obviously, it's not going to be easy to sign Monet, Sasha Banks. It's not going to be easy. It's probably going to cost millions. And she's probably maybe knowing what's going to go down, maybe try to play both sides to get the most money. She's doing other things. So I don't think that. I think that the mistake was hinting at it that way. You had a boss you had a boss reference. So, and unfortunately, look, fans, you got to realize Tony Storm was already announced as a teammate. So it's just they hinted at it. It disappointed the crowd. And here's what the mistake was made that caused the fan reaction. They dropped the lights, and then they brought up a Rampage graphic on the screen, and it pissed off everybody because people thought that it was going to be the debut. You don't do that because you in essence you hurt Tony Storm.
It's almost like you're teasing. Yeah, it's almost like you're teasing everybody, and then you set Tony Storm up to just put her in a bad spot.
Yeah. It's not ideal, but I didn't believe it was going to happen. I thought it was. I was excited for it, the idea of seeing it, but logically speaking, your logical brain says that a deal like that is not going to be put together in a week. She's going to do her deal. I think her first match, obviously, probably contracted to be with New Japan or other organizations and things like that. She's probably going to want to test it out and things like that. And, I obviously, if you're AEW, you want her down for 5 years, 4 years. You want to lock her down, and she's probably not down for a long-term commitment at this point in her career when she can get paid. Because you've reported it, we've talked about it. She can make anywhere near $100,000 for one appearance. Dude, you work 10 days a year as opposed to 50. So you're like, let me see how this works. So and now you know that there's Hollywood money out there where you get $20 million a picture, if or more. Please, I think that she's playing the field, and it just sucks for the fans because they wanted to see it. It's in L.A. I had visions, of course. See, that's where your imagination runs wild. I had visions of a song playing and Snoop Dogg coming out. I wanted another WrestleMania moment, but it didn't happen, and it stinks. But in the end, they moved through it pretty well, and it was highlighted AEW by the tag match, which was epic. Good ladder match. It was nice to see the moves that they were trying to do. Kenny Omega, you've seen the work with the ladder slid in between there before Kenny Omega got it. I thought it was great all the way around. I thought that the Young Bucks flying through the tables. These guys, these performers, they put it all on the line, and it exceeded Sheamus and Cesaro. That's the goal. The best of 7 series was set by Sheamus and Cesaro. And now you have the opportunity to go and top it, and they did. It was great. The right team won in my mind, and I think that now moving forward, while I would like Kenny Omega to be on his own and be a superstar, this is fun with the Young Bucks and getting the title back. It was worth it, and I think you elevated Pac and his crew.
Yeah, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I thought that was the highlight of the evening. I thought that was a great match. The conclusion of the best of 7s for the trios match. The one thing I did not like about it, the one thing I thought was a little bit poorly done. They got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it really felt like they had to cram everything, like 30 minutes worth of wrestling into 15 minutes, which made for a high-paced, fantastic match. And there were multiple times where throughout this match, I was like, oh my God, that's awesome. Holy cow, that was crazy. Like I had those out loud reactions as I was watching this match. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I thought it was great. I thought it was a really nice way to conclude. I just wish it had a little bit more time. I thought this match really capped off what was a really good AEW Dynamite. I felt like AEW Dynamite this week was absolutely fantastic, starting with the Moxley Hangman Page match, which there's some meat on that bone that they're going to revisit because did Hangman lose a little bit of himself, basically doing what Jon Moxley did to him? Like I think you can go back to that at some point, and that's how you started your show, and then you ended your show with this all-out war, which was absolutely fantastic. And again, sad thing was it only got 15 minutes. I thought it was absolutely great. Thought Rampage, you could miss it. The best part about Rampage was a match that I thought was going to absolutely suck, but it was more held together by Ruby Soho, who bled all over the place in a street fight, like all over the place. But for the most part, you can skip over Rampage. Not a whole lot there. Now, we do have some New Japan news, and this New Japan news is related to WWE. This report came out very early in the week, before Stephanie resigned and stepped down and retired, before Vince took over as the executive of the board, before possibly a deal being hashed out where WWE was getting sold to Saudi Arabia's investment fund. This came out very, very early. And it was WWE's interest in guys like Jay White, Hikuleo, Tama Tonga. Recently, Jay White set up a loser leaves Japan match against Hikuleo that was set up on night 2 of Wrestle Kingdom. Tama Tonga notably defeated WWE's Carl Anderson for the Never Openweight Championship at Wrestle Kingdom 17. So these are some big names. These are some big dudes. You've seen Jay White on AEW television. Hikuleo and Tama Tonga are parts of, or former parts of, the old Bullet Club. So these guys are absolutely fantastic. What do you make of WWE's interest in those guys? And would AEW be letting an opportunity slip by if WWE was able to sign those guys? Now, again, I don't know if WWE is going to have the same interest as what was originally reported, because there's a sale going on. It's all about trying to keep the numbers steady so you can get that bottom line for the biggest bang for your buck. But would you prefer these guys going to AEW? Would you prefer these guys going to WWE? What's your take on the interest level that WWE has in these guys and AEW should have in these guys?
Absolutely. Let the bidding war of 23 begin. I need Will Ospreay. I need Jay White in AEW. I need these feuds. I need to see the evolvement of these characters. I mean, you teased it. You had this partnership. I don't want to just have it be around the time of Forbidden Door. I want to see Switchblade Jay White. And can you believe that was the news to start the week? And it ends up being the 9th biggest story of the week. My God, it's Jay White, Switchblade.
Yeah.
You know, I think what disappointed some WWE fans is if Jay White goes to WWE, are they just going to do a knockoff Bullet Club and run it in the way that right now AJ Styles and his crew has been run? They're good. The OC has been okay, but not impactful, not memory making. They're there, they're in feuds, but it's not good enough. It's not to the level that I think AEW would be if you have Jay White in there. So they got to go to AEW. That's the prime spot. It does not appear just yet that WWE can take someone else from another company and then bring them in quickly and make them a star. It seems like they get them in the mix and they become homogenized, sanitized, and their star doesn't get as bright or as quickly as we would want. So I'd rather see Jay White. He hops in, boom, a couple of feuds, and it's going to be important. So we'll see how it progresses. But boy, the talent acquisition and what can happen in 2023 is going to be fun to watch. Yeah,
look, I think if you're AEW, if you let any of those guys slip through your fingertips, you are making a huge mistake. Again, I don't know if WWE's interest is as strong as it was earlier in the week because of everything that is going on. But if you're WWE, those are big names. Those are big guys. Those are dudes that you don't necessarily want the competition to have either. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out. Jay White sounds like he is done with New Japan and he wants to wrestle in America. So it sounds like he has conquered the rising sun, and now he wants to come to the United States and see what he can do. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place and where he signs in the very near future. It does have dates set up after Royal Rumble, so if WWE was to sign him, I don't anticipate him being at Royal Rumble because he does have some New Japan dates he's still working through. However, we have seen WWE and New Japan work out deals, as in Carl Anderson's case. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place. What was your show of the week? I'm going to give mine to Dynamite. I thought Dynamite hit the ground running. I thought it was fantastic, and I thought it ended with a banger. What was your show of the week this week?
Yeah, no doubt. When you have Hangman Page putting together the rare clean pin over Moxley, you have to give him credit. Only I think the second clean pin in a couple years for against Moxley. So give him credit.
All right, so we're both going to give it to Dynamite this week. You want some wrestling news and notes? I've got some breaking news if you want it.
Absolutely. Hit me with this week's professional wrestling news and notes. What made your list?
So about 45 minutes before we started recording, I found an article that stated that Frankie Kazarian had been released from AEW.
Wow.
He's been working with Impact. He asked for his release a little while ago. They finally have granted his release. So Frankie Kazarian is no longer with AEW. Now, back into some fallout with Vince McMahon. Vince wanting creative control. That was my worst fear, and it may be coming true. Late last weekend, Dave Meltzer of Wrestling Observer Radio reported that Vince initially wanted creative control upon his return, and really it just feels like it's a ticking time bomb before he gets it. That's because McMahon has changed the bylaws to ensure that no sale and no media rights deal can be completed by WWE without his approval. That's why we had that hostile takeover. He essentially put himself in as the key person negotiating the deal, which means he can negotiate whatever he wants, which means if he wants to be put back in charge of creative, he can make that part of the agreement with whomever is buying the company. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez explained. Meltzer said, I think the fact that he's going to be the key person selling, he may be looking for assurances that he'll be in charge. The thing with Vince is that if a deal was good for the stockholders with him not in charge, once it's sold, it's out of his hands and he's never getting back in. So he has to do a thing where it's not an approved sale unless it's the right terms, and they had to kind of accept him back and pretend that everything is all copacetic because he had said basically that any negotiation for the next TV deal or for the sale, he wasn't put back in charge. He would not hold it up. He would never agree to it. So it's kind of like they're handcuffed in a lot of ways. Alvarez said, I'm sure when a deal is negotiated, he's going to try to negotiate his way back in. Meltzer said, absolutely. And then Meltzer continued, but my gut is that once the sale is done, he probably will try to take over and get the creative back. I think everyone kind of expects that. I don't expect those moves to be made right away. But of course, Vince wants to be head of creative, and Vince does have power as far as to facilitate it. He probably at some point this year will have the ability to do it without having to negotiate repercussions. So then there's some more fallout from the Vince takeover and a possible sale of WWE. In a new article from Axios.com, the then co-CEO of WWE, Stephanie McMahon, and Chief Content Officer Paul Triple H Levesque opposed the sale of the company. The article said, sources told Axios that Stephanie McMahon and her husband, Paul Triple H Levesque, the company's Chief Content Officer and retired professional wrestler, had opposed a sale. Upon McMahon's return, two further board members resigned of their own volition, those being Manjit Singh, who was the one heading up the board's investigation into McMahon, and Ignace Loudon. Stephanie McMahon then resigned from her role as co-CEO and chairwoman and her position on the board on January 10th as Vince McMahon was elected executive chairman. So a whole lot going on here. Basically, Vince probably will get creative control back if the company is sold and it goes private. That's what the expectation is. Sounds like Stephanie basically stepped down to not oppose her father because her and Triple H seen things differently, which they see it the way I think the fans see it, and the fans freaking want it, but it doesn't matter because Vince is going to take a dump on all of our chests. It's what it is. Some more injury news coming out of the best of 7 match between the Elites and Penta, Rey Fenix, and Pac. Obviously, Pac worked the majority of these matches with a broken nose, but Dave Meltzer has confirmed that the Elite were also working through some injuries. On Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer said Nick Jackson suffered a broken toe in an earlier match. He was hurting just walking for the last month, plus he's still doing all the stuff he did in those matches. He is healing up to where he can walk without much discomfort. Sounds like Nick should make a good recovery here, barring any setbacks, probably looking at a few weeks before he's 100%. So everybody coming out of the best of 7, both sides suffered a few injuries and a few bumps and bruises. And that's going to do it for this week's wrestling news and notes, my brother.
Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Thank you guys for all the funny jokes that you made. The I am a real Arabian Hulk Hogan meme had me dying. I couldn't stop refreshing Twitter. Cody Rhodes, hieroglyphics in Arabic, great. You guys made a lot of jokes. I know it's not something to really joke about with the issues with the Saudi Arabian conglomerate over there, but you made a tough situation light. I don't see WWE eventually, just based on the talk that we just had, the negativity that kind of permeated what that would entail. I don't see WWE selling to the Arabians. I just can't. I think that would be devastating for morale, women, everything going on. You just got to kind of look to an American conglomerate that wants to give you some billions. And I think that maybe that the Saudis are being used as just a ploy of, hey, they're offering 5, give us 5.2 and we got a deal. And you still got to entertain.
You know what's funny?
Yeah.
I was scrolling through it. I follow a bunch of different wrestling stuff on Facebook and on Twitter. And there was a meme where it talked about the Attitude Era, and it was like, you'll never know how good you had it. Back in my day, you had a 4.5 chance of every Monday night possibly seeing a boob on TV. And as you talk about Saudi Arabia basically makes all the women wear all those clothes. So if that goes away, you'll have a 0.0000 chance of ever seeing a boob on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
So it just shows the difference.
Yeah, exactly. And look how
where we're at.
Look how classy we are. Adam's talking about human rights, boycotting, taking it to a hiatus from the podcast, and he ends the show with, you know what? It actually sucks too because we're not going to see any titties on TV. So
we're not going to see any boobs.
No more titties on TV. So Adam is now officially out on the WWE selling to the Saudi Arabians. So it's tough, man. It's tough all the way around. But everybody, let's see how this progresses. Let's make sure that do your research, take your time, make sure that you wait for SI, you wait for the likes of the Brian Alvarez's, the Dave Meltzer, and the Fightful.com. Make sure you wait and see before you go and title your shit sources and lie to people, because people take this shit seriously. It went around the world, worldwide news, and you can't put your name on something if it's not true. And by and large, guys, WWE probably is not going to announce the sale of their company at 11:45 at night on a random Tuesday, okay? It's going to sprinkle throughout the day. It's going to be talked about by CNBC, Forbes, Sports Illustrated, big-time companies as well. So remember that it's not going to come from DAZN or some 99th rated network. Wait for the big dogs to get in the mix, and then you will see what happens with the sale of WWE. Big times ahead. Let's see what it progresses, and let's see how AEW handles now some more competition. For the Jock, Adam Straczynski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. See everybody next week on the latest edition of the Doc and Jock Wrestling Podcast.